Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Western Liberty Network. It is 1:01 p.m. on Saturday, February 19th, and this is another of the ongoing series of training sessions that are provided via Zoom from Western Liberty Network on a variety of topics. Today, we're going to be talking about building a campaign team. But before we do that, there are a couple of things I need to get out of the way. First of all, I need to point out that Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization. As such, we do not endorse or oppose any candidate, political party, ballot measure, or legislation. We provide training to grassroots activists who can use the training in any way they like to support the campaigns that they care about. Participants may make statements that show support for a candidate or a party or legislation or a ballot measure, but those statements are not necessarily the views of Western Liberty Network, which takes no position on such subjects. With regard to resources that are available for those who are watching the recording, I'm going to do a quick share screen. And the first thing I'm going to bring up is the Western Liberty Network website. If you go to www.westernlibertynetwork.org, you will see our homepage. And this is our homepage. At the very top, we always talk about an event that's coming up, and we have a miniature conference taking place in Klamath Falls on the 26th of March. This is information about that. If you are anywhere in Southern Oregon and would like to participate, you can secure a ticket, only $39 here. Our agenda is here. You can download it. Scroll further down and you will see the topic featured at our Saturday trainings. Today's training, which is featured here, is on how to build a professional or volunteer political campaign team. And then further down on the pages, we have information that is useful about previous events. And there are some resources here. For example, on February 5th, we had our annual conference, and there are some resources here. The speech from Dennis Linthicum and Christina Soltis are here, and we will have more resources as I put them together and have them posted. And going further down, there's more and more information. If you would like to take advantage of our training resources, you can go to the training tab. And if you click on training, at some point you will see our training tab come up. And here the training page shows the different kinds of training we provide. There are a variety of training documents that are meant to be provided with a live training, but they also stand up on their own. Those can be downloaded by clicking on any of these links. Just find the topic that you're interested in. Scrolling down a little farther, you will see videos of our Saturday training sessions. As soon as our training session is over today, I will post that training, and it will be in place of this one, and everything else will be shifted down. So if you scroll down, there's over a year of topics. So if you are looking for resources, just scroll down, find a topic that you're interested in. I provide a lot of the trainings, but not all of them. We have a variety of guest trainers, including, as you see here, economist Stephen Moore, Wayne Allen Root, Cleon Cox, and others. And so we periodically have guest trainers. And if you decide you really like what we provide and want to help us to do more of it, you can go to the support training tab. If you go to that one, you have the opportunity to provide a one-time contribution or an automatic monthly contribution. And this is all tax deductible and helps Western Liberty Network stay active in the field. So those are that's some information for those of you who may be watching the recording today. I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now, and I'm going to begin the training. I'm going to put us on gallery view so we can see all of us. And so the idea here is to provide you with some of the basics of building a campaign team. If you are thinking about being a candidate for an office at any level, whether it be mosquito control board, county commissioner, state legislator, whatever it is, it's important to have this information, how to build a good campaign team. And I sometimes encourage people who are running unopposed to build a campaign team anyway. I think that no matter what position a candidate is running for, it's good to build a campaign team. Even if you're running unopposed and you're assured of winning your race, it's good to have a campaign team because it's more than just getting elected to a position. It's also advancing the movement, the limited government movement. And if you want to advance the limited government movement, it's important to help other people get experience in working a campaign. It's important to build cadres of people who know how to function. So even if you are running for a local nonpartisan position and you're running unopposed, I strongly urge you to build a campaign team and run a campaign. Voters will also be impressed. If you're running,
I guess that's it.
Interesting. All right.
The heck with that.
if you are running unopposed, and people say, well, why are you running a campaign?
Yeah.
We're running
Not sure how all
unopposed.
this
Hold on a
works.
second.
I know. I had to like literally Google mine last time. It was kind of
There's
weird.
some conversation here, so I'm going to mute everybody. Okay, now I'm going to interrupt myself. I've just muted everyone. I don't think I'm muted. Let me make sure that I'm not muted. Okay, I'm not muted, but I'm muted everyone because I heard a conversation in the background. If you want to speak, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. I like interactive presentations. So if you have a question while I'm speaking, or if you have a comment to add, please do so. Just unmute yourself, interject, speak, and when you're finished, remute yourself. And that way we'll keep background noises and feedback out of the picture. So anyway, if you run a candidate, even if you're unopposed, people might say, well, why are you running a campaign? You're running unopposed, you're assured of winning. And it's always good to tell people that, well, that may be, but I don't want to take people's votes for granted. I want to tell them why I should be elected. Even if I'm running unopposed, I want to let people know what I believe about certain things related to this position, and I don't want to take your vote for granted. People will appreciate that and they'll remember it. And also by running a campaign and building a campaign team, you will give volunteers and other people a reason to be active and give them some experience in the process. Now, there are a variety of directions you can take. If you are running a local nonpartisan race, like water district, fire district, park and rec, some of those kind of things, you may want to have a volunteer staff. You're probably not going to have a big dollar campaign, and you might want to have a staff of volunteers. If you are running for a more competitive seat, like some school board races, state legislative races, county commissioner positions, you may want to have a paid staff, and that means you're going to have to raise money. Western Liberty Network does provide training on how to raise money and other things that are related to such a race. But this training is going to be limited to building a campaign staff and what kind of positions should exist in a campaign staff. In some races, you're only going to need a few people, and positions are going to sort of double up. In other races, you're going to need people to be more specialized. I'll try and go through these as I go down the positions. But the first member of a campaign team is, of course, the candidate. That is the most important person, and while it may seem obvious, there are candidates who run for office that don't really know why they're running. They don't really know what they want to do. They don't understand the position they're running for. So it's important that if you are a candidate, or if you are thinking about volunteering for a candidate, that the candidate have at least a passing familiarity with what the responsibilities of the position is that he or she is running for, that they know what the basic issues are involved. They have some ideological grounding as to the direction they want to take a particular board or commission, because the candidate sets the tone. The candidate sets the tone for the team. Whether a team is paid or unpaid, if a candidate knows why they're running, they know the position, they know what they want to do, and they have an ideological grounding, it's going to impact and inspire the whole team, even if that team is being paid. They're going to go the extra mile for you. They're going to want to work very hard. So the first member of a campaign team is always the candidate. The next one, it could be one person or two people, depending on the size of your race. You've probably heard the phrase general consultant bantied around. Usually the phrase general consultant is used in conjunction with a larger campaign, governor, US Senate, Congress, something like that. In a campaign team, the general consultant is basically the architect of a campaign. They are the chief strategist. What the general consultant does is evaluate the candidate, is evaluate the political environment of the district that they're running in, look at the race, develop a strategy for victory, and then write a campaign plan which provides a path to victory. There are two kinds of campaign plans that can be written. One is to win the election. Sometimes in a race where victory is impossible, the campaign plan is written to achieve secondary objectives, such as building a base of donors, building a base of volunteers, all of these things. But anyway, the general consultant is the architect of the campaign. They come up with a campaign plan. They are the chief strategist. If you're in a race large enough where there's polling involved, the general consultant will use that polling, sometimes commission the polling. If you don't have paid pollsters working for you, you can sometimes get information off of publicly available polls, US Census information relating to education, income, those kind of things. You take a look at the other opponents, what you know about the other opponents, how much money it takes to win a particular race based on what it cost to win the same position in previous elections, those kind of things. The general consultant is the strategist and comes up with a written campaign plan that the candidate approves. Next is the campaign manager. Okay, the campaign manager, his or her job is to implement the campaign plan. Basically, take the elements of the campaign plan, put them into motion, hire or secure the people you need to do the different jobs in the campaign plan, and then make sure the trains run on time. That's what a campaign manager typically does. The general consultant comes up with the plan, is the architect of the campaign. The campaign manager, which answers to the general consultant and sometimes the candidate, implements that plan. Much like in a corporation, you have a board of directors which sets overall strategy and policy, and then you have, a CEO, chief executive officer, whose job it is to implement the board's plan. Or in some governmental bodies, you've got a board of commissioners, and then you've got a general manager or a city manager, somebody like that. The general consultant is the architect of the campaign. The campaign manager implements the campaign plan designed by the general consultant, and throughout the campaign, makes sure that the trains run on time and provides feedback to the general consultant and the candidate regarding what's actually going on in the field so that the campaign plan can be adjusted accordingly. One thing that's important about a campaign plan, and that every good general consultant knows, is that campaigns are fluid, circumstances change, candidates enter and exit the race. It involves changes of strategy. And so written campaign plans are fluid, must be updated, must evolve with the campaign. And the entire campaign must adapt. And that falls to the campaign manager, who implements the campaign plan. And as the campaign plan changes, what the campaign manager does changes as well. In small campaigns, the general consultant and the campaign manager can be the same person. You may want to have somebody who will design a campaign for you and execute that campaign. Such would be the case for like a water district race, or a park and rec board race, or a vector control board race. You would be fine to have your general consultant and campaign manager to be the same person. And when they are the same person, you can just call them the campaign manager, or you can call them your consultant, or whatever it is. But in smaller campaigns, they can be the same person. In large campaigns, they really need to be different people, because the skill sets, the mentality, all of those things are really different from what a general consultant does and what a campaign manager does. I know a number of really good campaign managers who would make lousy consultants. And I know a number of consultants who are great, but would make lousy campaign managers. But in a smaller race, they can be the same person. Are there any questions so far? Okay. I'll go into the next set of people, and this relates to campaign finances. You're going to want a treasurer, somebody who's going to keep the checkbook, who's going to write the checks, who will distribute money as the candidate should direct, or as authorized by the candidate in the campaign plan written by the general consultant. A lot of times a campaign plan one of the things it does is it establishes roles and responsibilities and spheres of authority. And so a campaign plan may authorize the general consultant to spend money on behalf of the campaign for things like polls, or for a private investigator, or those kinds of things. Or a campaign manager may be authorized to make limited expenditures for such things as flyers, return envelopes. There may be some authorized expenses for travel, food, lodging, that kind of thing. But anyway, the treasurer is the person who keeps track of the money, and who keeps the candidate and the consultant and the manager advised as to how the money is coming in, how it's going out, what needs to be done financially, and make sure everything works with the bank, and make sure everything goes to the penny. This is no different really than a treasurer's position in any company or project or campaign. Your county, Libertarian or Republican Party treasurer, those kinds of things. And then related to that, you can sometimes have, and you should have, a campaign finance compliance consultant. Whether you are in Oregon or in Washington, you have to account for your money. You have to submit campaign finance reports. Now in Oregon, if you sign a form called PC7, you can spend and raise up to $3,500 for a small race and not have to submit campaign finance reports. But if you go 1 cent over that, you have to file reports from the first dollar you ever raised. So you need somebody who is on top of it, somebody who knows what the election laws are with respect to campaign finance reporting. And you need to have somebody who does the ORSTAR reports. ORSTAR is an online system that is used in Oregon to track campaign finance reporting. You get on ORSTAR and you put in your transactions, and the public can see how you're spending your money. There are many ways to make mistakes, and there are many ways to be fined if you are late in putting in a transaction. If you put in a transaction inaccurately, there are just a lot of ways that you can make mistakes with campaign finance reporting, and you need somebody that knows what they're doing. Fortunately, the Secretary of State provides free training in how to do campaign finance reporting, and the Washington Secretary of State provides similar facilities. So if you know someone who would be willing to be your campaign finance consultant, and they don't know what to do, they can go and take this training. And the Secretary of States of Oregon and Washington, although I have many disagreements with them about a lot of the things they do, are generally extremely helpful and responsive with respect to questions. We just got a check from so-and-so out of state. How do I handle it? They will provide that information. It's in the training. There's a manual that can provide many of the answers. And if none of that answers a question, you can call them or you can email them. If you are interacting with the Secretary of State of Washington or Oregon, unless it is a very simple question, I generally encourage people to submit questions in writing so that you get an answer in writing. If you get an answer in writing from the Secretary of State's office and their answer is wrong, you will not be held accountable for the error. But if it's verbal, they will not be held accountable. You'll be held accountable, even if they provided the information on which your action was based. But the point here is that you have someone on the campaign team who watches the money, who watches the checkbook. You have someone else on the campaign team who understands or is responsible for campaign finance compliance, reporting compliance, and does the actual campaign finance reporting with the Secretary of State of Washington, Oregon, or whoever the reporting authority is. Now, again, these two people can be the same person. You can have someone who is both the treasurer and the campaign finance compliance consultant. This works best in the small, local, nonpartisan races, where you might have somewhere around $10,000 or less, or maybe $1,000 or something like that. You've got a very, relatively small amount of money for a campaign. You can have one person be both the treasurer and the campaign finance compliance consultant. But if you start to deal, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 or more, which you might have in a lot of school board races or state legislative races where you start to get into the six figures, you really want to have two separate people. You want to have a treasurer and you want to have a campaign finance compliance consultant. Now, some campaigns make a very bad mistake, and the candidate himself or herself personally takes on the responsibilities of campaign finance reporting or being the treasurer. This is a very, very bad mistake. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of ways to make honest mistakes, and honest mistakes get fined. And if a volunteer or even a paid treasurer or campaign finance consultant makes a mistake, well, then it's a mistake. The campaign pays the fine, and if the mistake isn't too bad, you just keep going on. If the mistake is horrible, you fire the treasurer or the campaign finance compliance consultant and you find a new one. But if it's the candidate, it's politically disastrous, because the opponents of the candidate can simply say, how can we trust this person to handle the finances of our community when they can't even handle the finances of their own campaign? And so it's really important to insulate the candidate from those kind of accusations by providing a separate person to be the treasurer and a separate person, when necessary, to be the campaign finance compliance consultant. It's really important that you have that. If they make a mistake, it's just a mistake. But if the candidate makes the same mistake, then they can come under political attacks. Are there any questions at this point about that? Okay, what do we got here today? We got 13 people. That's awesome. Okay. One of the important aspects of a campaign is the ability to project a candidate's message. And so you're going to need a communication director. This is going to be the first voice of a campaign. Now, naturally, the candidate is the most authoritative voice of a campaign, but sometimes you need someone to run interference for a candidate, or to give the candidate time, or somebody that's going to put out positions of the candidate in the third person. And so for that, you may want a communication director. A communication director will field calls from the media, radio stations, newspapers, bloggers, TV people. The communication director will be responsible for putting out authorized press releases. And those press releases will go out by the communication director. And at the bottom, it'll say, questions, contact the communication director at this number. The communication director will be the person who introduces the candidate in some cases, answers questions on behalf of the campaign, if those are very well established, who sometimes puts things out in the best light. But certainly when news from the campaign is to be disseminated, quotes from the candidate, those kind of things, the communication director will do that. So the communication director is someone who's going to have contact with newspapers, TV reporters, radio reporters, bloggers, sometimes work with the campaign manager. If the communication director gets requests for the candidate to appear in certain venues, the communication director will coordinate that in consultation with the campaign manager or the general consultant or the candidate, depending on how the campaign plan is written and how those authorities are laid out and designated. But it's really important that you have a communication director, and likewise, another person, the social media director. One of the less expensive ways to disseminate information these days is through social media. I know a lot of conservatives don't like social media. There are a lot of conservatives out there who either do not have or have canceled their Facebook accounts, their Instagram accounts, their Twitter accounts. These things are important for a campaign because they are channels through which things can be communicated that advance the campaign. And so you need somebody who understands social media. And this person will manage the Twitter account, Facebook account, MeWe account, whatever social media platforms you decide, or the campaign decides to participate in. The social media director will be responsible for maintaining the campaign's presence online. This will include the website. And so it's a very, very important position. Now, again, with smaller campaigns, the communication director and the social media director can be the same person. And it doesn't take a lot to do it. You need somebody that's got some skills, but you know, even if you're running for a water board position, there's a lot that can be done in social media and communication. You know, I know that in Klamath Falls, water is a big issue. The new Willamette treatment plant, which is working its way up to the Tualatin Valley Water District, that's a big issue. The Bull Run watershed, the Willamette River, all these things are big issues. And so there are positions that can be delineated and provided to the media by way of the communication director, but can be articulated all over social media by a social media director on behalf of a candidate. But in smaller campaigns, and even some mid-level campaigns, these can be the same person, but it's a key function. So what we have right now basically is you've got the candidate, you've got campaign management, which can be divided between a general consultant and a campaign manager, or they can be the same person. So that's two things. You've got campaign finance, which can be divided by a treasurer and a campaign finance compliance consultant, or it can be the same person. You know, that's three areas. And a communication person and a social media director who can be the same person. Now, at the very minimum, you know, this is what you need. You need a candidate, a manager, a treasurer, and a communication person serving these roles. That's a campaign team of 4. And for small campaigns, this is probably enough. For larger campaigns, you're going to want to make those 7 by splitting up these functions as I've described, because there's just going to be too much work to do. Now, if there are some other positions you can have, but those are the ones you really have to have: a candidate, a manager, somebody to deal with finance, and someone to deal with communication. That is really the minimum of what you need to have a full campaign team. But if you have people who are willing to do it, you can add to that. Field directors. These are people who work in the field, hence the name field directors. These are people who will coordinate things like door knocking campaigns, phone call campaigns. They will work to find and enlist volunteers to do work in the field. If there's going to be an event like the dedication of a new fire station, the field director might ask that volunteers go show up and wave signs for somebody who's running for a fire and rescue board. These are people who just actually do work in the field. If you are dealing with a contested race, it's important to have field directors that are actually going beyond the social media and going beyond whatever else you have, that are putting, you know, that's creating a presence in the field for you. Another person you can have is a research and policy director. This is somebody who does deep research on various policies and helps the candidate create white papers on things that are important, like should a new water treatment plant be built? Should we merge these 2 fire districts? Should we build light rail in this location or not? The research person helps the candidate by providing good research and information on policy matters that are significant to the issues being provided, giving the candidate information they need. Related to that, you may want to have an opposition research consultant. Now, for small nonpartisan positions, people don't like it when, especially where the winner is a volunteer, people don't like negative campaigns. And, a lot of times people say that negative campaigns are disliked, but they work. Well, that's true at the higher level, but at the lower level, they do not work. They backfire. If the position is not an enumerated position with a salary and benefits, if the position is basically a volunteer position and people start attacking candidates, voters don't like it. When I ran for re-election on the Tualatin Valley Water District in 2015, somebody ran against me and spent $20,000 on a negative campaign against me. It backfired. I spent zero. And I got all the endorsements. Everyone hated the other person for doing what they did. And it just did not work. And I ended up winning the race 60-40. At the higher level, though, if the person that you're running against is running for a financially responsible position and research finds out that they did a stint in prison for embezzlement, that's something that people ought to know. And so a lot of campaigns will have an opposition research consultant that will find information about a candidate's opponents. And an opposition research consultant should also do research on the candidate they're working for themselves. A lot of times with larger races, if a candidate had an embarrassing period in their lives, they don't tell anybody. They don't tell anybody, and they don't even tell their campaign staff. But if it comes out, it's disastrous for the campaign. That happened to Monica Webby when she ran for US Senate, if you remember. There was a couple of incidents she had with someone that she was dating that resulted in police calls, and her campaign didn't know about it. I'm friends with Monica. I think she's the cat's meow. I wish she would have won that Senate race, but she had this incident and she didn't tell anybody, and she didn't tell her campaign. So when it came out into the press, people were blindsided, and the campaign staff was blindsided, and they never really recovered from that. So an opposition research person, if you're running a high-level race at all, you're going to want to research the candidate too. One other thing too is, if you're running a high-level campaign, like a US Senate race, governor, state legislative race, something like that, I highly recommend that the campaign hire a private investigator to thoroughly investigate the candidate themselves. And that's because the candidate may or may not tell you. I mean, you've got to have a conversation at some point. Okay, we're about to enter this campaign. Is there anything in your background we need to be aware of, that we need to be prepared for, that we need to have a response to? And candidates will sometimes say, no, there's nothing, but that's rarely true. And so a private investigator should be hired by the campaign to investigate the candidate and find anything in the candidate's background that could be compromising or could compromise the campaign. You keep it to yourselves, you keep it to a small circle, but then if you find something, you're able to determine if you can respond to it, and if you can respond to it, how you respond to it. One of the reasons you do this is to prepare the campaign staff for issues that may come up so that they can have a response ready ahead of time. And even if the candidate lived a stellar, pristine life and there is nothing to find, if you're going to be asking large donors to write big checks to support your campaign, you will get a much better response, and you will be much more successful in raising donations if you can tell prospective donors that the campaign has hired a private investigator, and we found out that there is nothing that will compromise this candidate. Or if you can say, we found out that there were these things that were involved, but we have responses ready to go in case they come up, here's what they are. If you are able to tell that to large donors, you're going to increase their confidence, and they're going to be more likely to write a big check. But opposition research is meant to find compromising aspects of of your opponents. So you can use it or not use it as you see fit. But generally, these sorts of things only apply to the larger campaigns. Again, with the community-based volunteer campaigns, unless someone was a sex offender and didn't disclose it, unless there's something like that, you don't want to run a negative campaign in a local nonpartisan race. But getting back to the beginning of this section, you want someone to research the issues and provide the candidate with briefings on the issues. The candidate should already be somewhat aware, but this will augment what the candidate knows and provide some options. And again, in smaller races, the research policy director and the opposition research consultant can be the same person. Covered a lot here. Are there any questions? Again, if you have questions or comments in the middle of this, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and speak. By the way, I'm going to give you this. Stephen Colbert, who's a comedian, Jon Stewart, who's a comedian, he wrote a book about how American politics works. And he's not a conservative or a libertarian. He's a well-known liberal. But this particular book, America, the book it's called, is hilarious. And he had a page on building a campaign team, and it's hilarious. It's not politically correct, but it's really funny, and there are germs of truth in it. But I'm going to send that to you now for you to look at and at your leisure. And if nothing else, it'll give you a really good laugh. Other possibilities for staff members. You could have strategists that work with the general consultant that provide multiple points of view or different approaches to taking on a campaign, providing competing strategies to be included in the campaign plan. If you're going to be buying media, you're going to need a buyer. Somebody that buys airtime, somebody that buys radio airtime, cable television time, certain streaming services. Media buyers usually make their money with a 15% rebate on what the campaign pays the people they are buying airtime from. So typically, if a campaign wants to spend $100 with KXL, they'll pay KXL $100 and the buyer will get a 15% rebate from KXL. So media buyers typically don't cost the campaign anything. They make their money on a percentage of what the campaign buys. But that's somebody you might want on your team to work with your communication director, your social media director, also your media consultant and buyer. And if you have production needs, like what kind of a commercial to make, what kind of a radio ad to make, they usually have teams of people that they work with that can do the production. And of course, the media consultant will work with with the candidate, the management, and the communication team to develop and disseminate the various commercials. Another one is grassroots organization. This is sort of an extension on field directors. Field directors, as you will recall, are people who work in the field to disseminate the candidate's image and views in the public by doing door knocking campaigns, phone campaigns, email campaigns, those kinds of things. But you might sometimes want to have a more developed grassroots organization that works below the field director. And this could be such things as county chairs, precinct captains, those kinds of things. Folks that'll be responsible for making sure that the field work to be done is being done in a specific area or a specific way. And then finally, there's a position that is more important than a lot of people recognize, a scheduler and a candidate's personal assistant. A lot of times these are the same thing. A scheduler is someone obviously who keeps track of the master schedule, not just where a candidate is scheduled to speak, but maybe when meetings are to take place among the campaign staff, or when the campaign is going to meet specific donors, or when the campaign or when the candidate is going to have an interview with a newspaper reporter or do an editorial board interview. Scheduler is very important, is very key. And I didn't mention it above because on some of the very small campaigns, sometimes a candidate can do that themselves, or in consultant with their campaign manager, they can do that themselves. But if you start to run a very active campaign, you're going to want a scheduler, somebody that maintains the campaign master calendar. A lot of times you can use a tool like Google Mail, whereby multiple people have access to a calendar, and the scheduler is the person who's responsible for adding, removing, editing events that are placed on that calendar. And then you have a candidate personal assistant. Candidate personal assistant is a person that goes everywhere with the candidate. Sometimes it is a spouse of the candidate, sometimes it is a best friend of the candidate. But anyway, the candidate personal assistant makes sure that the candidate is getting rest. They're the ones that drive if you're going to go on any trips. Make sure the candidate can be rested, have the candidate be time to read. If you're at the meeting, the candidate assistant helps to introduce the candidate to different people. Also protects the candidate from people. If someone grabs the candidate's arm and gets into a conversation that goes too long, the candidate assistant is the bad guy. The candidate assistant goes up and says, "I'm sorry, we're running late for an appointment, I have to go." And the candidate can simply say, "Well, that's it, I've got to go, I'm sorry." And the candidate's not the bad guy, the candidate assistant is the bad guy. That's a really important function for the candidate assistant to take on. Also, the candidate's personal assistant takes notes, keeps track of phone numbers, sometimes makes phone calls to confirm things, make sure things are getting done. In other words, make sure that the candidate, if the candidate is speaking, make sure they've got a bottle of water. Taking care of the personal needs of the candidate while the candidate is in the field, taking care of certain logistic needs, interfacing with the campaign staff when the candidate is busy. Those kind of things the candidate personal assistant is really good for. And a lot of times the candidate's personal assistant in smaller campaigns is also the campaign scheduler. But in larger campaigns that are very busy, you're going to want those to be very separate things. So you can have a campaign team that's got as many people as you want on it. But for small races, you really need the four basic ones: the candidate, some kind of a campaign manager, somebody to do campaign finances, and someone to do communications, social media. The next tier of positions is to have somebody working in the field, somebody that's doing research, and after that, you've got the possibility to have a candidate's personal assistant and or scheduler, somebody to build a grassroots organization below the field director, somebody who will buy media if you're going to do that, and additional strategists to go into the consultant. Now, Western Liberty Network focuses primarily on local nonpartisan races. So many of these positions will be overkill for a lot of these races. But at the same time, we do provide training to people who are running for higher offices, and they will need more of these. But like I said, if you are running for a race at any level, do have a campaign. Even if you're running unopposed, do have a campaign. Give yourself the benefit of the experience of a real campaign. And to advance the movement, give volunteers and people who are willing to help you the opportunity to gain experience running a campaign. If you're running unopposed, all the better, because you can make mistakes and it's not going to cost you anything. You're still almost certainly going to win the race. And so it's good to have that field where people can make mistakes and not have to pay a real big penalty. That's like a real big bonus. And so there are a lot of benefits to running a campaign, no matter what the circumstances of your race, no matter what the race is that you're involved in. And it's really important to give people the opportunity to be involved. With these basic tips, it's a lot of information, but you can review it. If you think this is useful, this is being recorded right now and it's going to be posted on the training tab of the westernlibertynetwork.org website by the end of this day. So you can go back and replay it as much as you want. And of course, there's that joke sheet I sent all of you that you should be able to get a laugh of, but you'll glean some information off of that too. It's an interesting thing. So that is my training. Are there any questions? No questions. Usually when I get no questions, it means I have been so incredibly descriptive that nobody actually has any questions. But it also sometimes means that I gave people so much information that they need time to absorb it before formulating any questions. And since I don't know that I'm the most articulate person in the world, I'm guessing it's probably the latter. If you have questions about this presentation, yes, it looks like Rod, you've got a question. Go ahead.
I'm always the guy that has questions.
Okay.
Anyway, what I want to ask about, I've run 8 campaigns. Only one of them was a salaried campaign. I've been a court commissioner. I'm currently a city councilor.
Mhm.
I've been a county commissioner 8 years.
Where?
Of the Wasco County.
Excellent.
I was on the Board of Directors Association of Oregon Counties.
Mhm.
And out of my 8 campaigns, this will be the 9th, because I'm running for Wasco County Commissioner again after a 4-year hiatus.
Good.
And so maybe some rules changed. I heard you mention the $3,500, the Form PC7.
Yes.
And for some reason, $750 was in my mind as the trigger to where you had to make sure you had a separate bank account and so forth. Was that an old number, or is that another level?
That's an older number that typically relates to things like, what a voter pamphlet statement costs and whatnot. But the rules have been updated, and now you can spend up to $3,500 without having to report. That said, I would still recommend, even if you're spending less than $3,500 and you plan to file PC7, I would still get a separate account for your campaign. Keep your personal expenses and your campaign expenses separate. That's just good practice.
That's question number 2.
Mhm.
Okay. Because in the past, I've pretty much been a one-man show.
Mhm.
And that's going to be the big change this time, is bringing some other people in.
Mhm.
And it's hard to do because I'm a guy who does things.
Sure.
Old public relations background, a financial background. I mean, all those kinds of things. But this time, no, I want to build a team. I'm not sure of how many.
Let me interject real quick.
Yeah.
That is very smart of you to do. They say that a lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client. I think that if you are in a contested political race, the same is true for candidates. And the reason why is candidates cannot be objective. The first thing is that their ego is invested. Some it's a lot, others it's a little, but with no one is it 0. There's always some ego involved. And when you have any ego involved in a campaign, it stops you from seeing things objectively. Having people on your campaign team helps you see things objectively. Also, there are situations like I was once helping a candidate who gave a speech in front of a service club. And after the speech was over, 5 or 6 people went up to the candidate and asked questions and were very supportive and enthusiastic. And that candidate said, I know I'm going to win this election. And I said, well, that's great. What makes you think you're going to win this election? And he says, everyone who came up to me thought I did a great job. Everybody who came up to me said they were going to support me. And I said, yes, that's true. But if there are people in the audience who didn't like you or not going to support you, they left, right? And it's like, yeah, you might win and maybe you turned everyone on, but you can't tell based on the 5 or 6 people that came up and talked to you. That's a good sign, but it's not conclusive. And, he saw that then, but didn't see it at the time. And that's the kind of bubble that candidates sometimes fall into. Having a staff stops that. Go ahead, please continue.
So the treasurer thing is a big one for me, that I'm going to definitely have somebody help with that, although I'm sure I'll be involved in all these areas. But
sure.
Again, as an old radio TV guy, newsman and talk show host, I'm pretty good at looking at both sides of things, but it is a fact for people that haven't been in that kind of business that you really have to push your ego out of the way. And I think that's been one of my strengths is
Mhm.
being open. The $3,500, quick question, and I have a bunch of forms here from the state and so forth. Okay. Right now I've taken no donations.
Mhm.
I have my own checkbook. And does that count as part of the 3,500? I just want to clarify.
Well, everything that you spend for the campaign counts toward the 3,500.
No matter where it came from, even though it's my own. I just wanted to
That's
make
right.
sure.
Even if it's your own money. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an official of the Secretary of State's office authorized to speak authoritatively on policy. But my understanding is that candidates, if they wish, can loan themselves money. If you loan your campaign money and there's money left over at the end of the campaign, you can pay yourself back. But if a candidate,
You can only pay yourself back if you first call the Secretary of State and clarify what went on and so forth. They have to, if you do that, if you take the money back out of the account without talking to them first, you're in trouble.
yeah, I mean, you can report it and document it properly, but it's always good to make sure that after the campaign's over, whether you win or lose, you've paid all your bills, you've taken care of all of your expenses, and if there's money left, you can repay yourself if you loaned money to the campaign.
Right.
After the campaign is over, you can, and after you've paid your bills and loans may be extended by other people, you can either pay yourself back, or you can donate it to a 501c3 organization,
right,
or you can donate it to another PAC. But if you donated the money, it's gone. If you loaned the money, you can get it back if there's money left after you've paid everybody else off.
Exactly.
Right.
The amount in 3 campaigns, each one of them for Wasco County Commissioner, winning 2 terms and then losing the 3rd one. I've spent with donations, the majority donations, $8,000 to $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
My opponent in the last one spent over $30,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I know that's going to take a lot more money this time in this day and age. And there were certain dirty tricks that have been played. I never campaign against the opponent. I always campaign about myself and my own views and why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been a rule. And it's a good one to stick with. I can't control other people that might be around me, but I do the best I can. But the larger amounts of money now, that's important. That's 3,500. And I appreciate that.
Yep.
And there was another question I had before you talked, and I think I lost that one. But
well, maybe you'll get it back. One other thing I wanted to comment on with regards to what you said is you pointed out that you're going to need people, but you keep on top of what they're all doing.
Exactly.
And that's important to do. But one thing that's important to not do is micromanage.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've chosen, and this is, you probably know this, but for the benefit of anyone watching the recording here, if you have written a good campaign plan, or your consultant has, or your manager has, the campaign plan includes a listing of all the positions, and it also provides clear descriptions on what their authority is, what their scope of authority is, and who they answer to, and what their specific jobs are. If you have done this in the campaign plan and everyone understands their roles and their authority and their accountability, then there's not a lot you have to do. You want to keep an eye on things, but you don't want to be micromanaging them. If you've got good people, you can trust them to do their jobs. Keep an eye out, but keep a loose leash, not a tight leash. Let them do their jobs.
And that's why I'm here today. And because, again, it's always been, I'm not somebody who asks people to help me, but because of the changes and other campaigns and the things that they've done, things have changed over the last 8 to 10 years. Sure. And you just can't handle it by yourself. But anyway, but all the nuts and bolts, I'm already putting into play. What I have to do now is do exactly what you're talking about, is gather some people to implement those nuts and bolts.
There you go. And Lori Kimmel has a couple of comments. With turnover at the Secretary of State's office, the breadth of knowledge in elections has decreased. Get it all in writing. That's true. If you have a question of the Secretary of State's office, unless it is a very simple thing, submit it in writing and get their answer in writing. If they give you the wrong answer verbally, you're still in trouble if you do it wrong. If they give you the wrong answer in writing and you do it wrong, but in the way they said, then you're okay. So always get it in writing. Learn to
I would add one more thing to that.
Yeah.
In past campaigns for county, the Secretary of State's office was just amazing. Even though it's gotten more complex now, they always were there when I made a phone call and got it answered, and just a great team. I
Yep.
appreciate
They
that.
do a real good job. And Rod, with your level of experience in this, I'd like to stay in touch with you. After this training, maybe you could assist in providing some candidate training for WLN down the future if you're so willing to consider it.
I saw one of your guests on your March meeting in Southern Oregon is my friend Dennis.
Oh, yeah.
And we came in as county commissioners together.
Mhm.
And out of that class of commissioners, I think, let's see, David Brock, there's about 4 that went on to the legislature.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're all younger than me.
Well, nobody's getting younger, I guess. Bethany says, learn to delegate and not have to be in control over everything. That's good advice. Lori Kimmel writes under Dennis Richardson. He even answered questions himself. That's true. And I hope he is at peace wherever he is. He's a good man. Victoria says, thank you. Great advice. Thank you, Victoria. Are there any other questions or comments? No? Good training today. I want to thank everyone who participated. Unless there's anything anyone else would like to add, we're going to call it a day. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll be back with another training next week. And God bless all of you. Take care. Oh, wait, Philip, did you have a question? No, he has no question. Okay, very good. All right, God bless.
Thank you so
Take care.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.